Welcome back, everybody, to the NCAA Next Up Dynasty here on NCAA Football 14. Today's a pretty big episode as we'll be revealing the 2024 College Football Playoff along with all of the major awards, all of which have been voted on by you guys within the past couple of days. I've received a grand total of 145 votes. I appreciate everybody who's making an input on this series because you guys are deciding the teams who get into the playoff along with all the major award winners. We've gone through the conference championships. We've gone through all the resumes of these teams and these players. So now it's time to end the anticipation and get some answers. We've got our bracket ready for the College Football Playoff reveal, the first ever 12-team playoff. Along with that, we're going to be going over the awards, including the Heisman Trophy. And I think that's where we're going to start today's episode with all of the major awards, and we'll open it up with the Heisman Trophy, which had 8 nominees for the award. Those players were quarterback out of Duke, Justin Tucker. Quarterback out of Clemson, Cade Hutchinson. Quarterback out of Houston, Kane Sanders. Quarterback out of TCU, Sterling Yorkshire. Quarterback out of Mississippi State, DeAndre Smith. Quarterback out of Missouri, Latavius Merrington. Running back out of Notre Dame, MJ Hill. And running back out of Rutgers, Dior Antoine. All right, it's time for the moment of truth. The 2023 Heisman Memorial Trophy winner is quarterback Cade Hutchinson of the Clemson Tigers. I think this is very well deserved. Hutchinson leading the best team in college football. He got 143 total votes out of 145 possible, 73 of which were first place votes. Behind him, Kane Sanders finished in second, and Justin Tucker finished in third. And as you can see on the right, that's the exact order I put it in. I had Cade Hutchinson as my Heisman winner, followed by Sanders and Tucker. I think the Heisman voting committee, you guys, got it completely right. Cade Hutchinson's been the best player in the country this year, leading the best team in the country. He's done it all as a passer and a runner and a big play threat while doing it with unbelievable efficiency. And of course, we know he will be the number 1 pick in the NFL draft, most likely, leading the Clemson Tigers to a college football playoff spot. Let's talk about the other awards next up before we reveal the 12 playoff teams, as we start with the Maxwell Award. The finalists were, again, Kane Sanders, Justin Tucker, and Cade Hutchinson. Once again, the winner of the award is Cade Hutchinson, the quarterback out of Clemson, grabbing 75 votes. Kane Sanders finished close behind in second place. This is not necessarily the Heisman Trophy, but it's still a very meaningful award and another one to add to the list of awards in the trophy case of quarterback Cade Hutchinson. Very well deserved. In the Walter Camp, another award representing one of the best players in the country. Our nominees are wide receiver Kramer Gildeford, running back MJ Hill, and the ultimate winner, Rutgers running back Dior Antoine. Although I personally voted Kramer Gildeford out of Houston for the award, I completely understand why Dior Antoine won. He is so valuable to his team, so important to the Rutgers Scarlet Knights, and had just such a fantastic season. Very well deserved for the senior running back, who's probably going to be a first-round pick. The Bednarik and Nagurski Awards I did together for the 3 best defensive players in the country. The nominees are San Diego State linebacker Asher Gonzalez, Auburn linebacker Devin Banks, and Nebraska linebacker Aiden Milligan. Ultimately, in a landslide, the winner was Asher Gonzalez of San Diego State, and I completely agree. He was the best defensive player in the country this year with 124 tackles, 30 of which went for a loss, to go with 9 sacks, 3 interceptions, and 2 fumble forces. He's probably going to be a first-round pick in this upcoming NFL draft after having just such a ridiculous senior season. The Davey O'Brien Award for Best Quarterback. We had 4 nominees: Kane Sanders, Justin Tucker, Cade Hutchinson, and DeAndre Smith. Ultimately, this was a pretty close race, but Cade Hutchinson would get the win, his 3rd award of the day. I personally voted for Kane Sanders, and I understand how that might look weird because I voted for Cade Hutchinson to win the Heisman, but I think Kane Sanders was the best pure passing quarterback in the country this year, but Cade Hutchinson was obviously phenomenal too, so I don't have a major problem with him winning. The Doak Walker Award for the best running back comes down to MJ Hill, Anthony Raymond, and Dior Antoine. Ultimately, in what ended up being one of the closest races of the year between Hill and Antoine, Dior Antoine of Rutgers ended up winning it with 74 total votes, and he was my vote as well. I completely agree. He didn't have as much volume or yardage as MJ Hill, but he had more efficiency, more explosive plays, and more big-time plays in the passing game. But all three of these running backs were very spectacular. The Fred Biletnikoff Award for the best receiver came down to Kramer Gilderford of Houston, Tyler Maxwell of Missouri, and Romeo Gardner of Mississippi State. In a landslide, Houston's Kramer Gilderford would win the award with 112 catches, over 1,500 yards, and 25 receiving touchdowns. Gilderford obviously had a great quarterback throwing him the ball, but he has been the best receiver in the country and completely deserves this award. As for the John Mackey Award for the best tight end in the country, it was down to Tyler Harris of Central Michigan, Mario Hummeler of TCU, and Latrell McAllister of Clemson. Ultimately, the award would end up going to Tyler Harris, as his numbers were just a little bit better than the other two guys leading the Central Michigan offense to the MAC championship. He had a phenomenal senior season, although I personally voted for Mario Hummeler, who got last place of the group. Hummeler doesn't necessarily have as many catches or yards as these two guys have, but Hummeler's value to the TCU offense is unparalleled in my opinion, but all three of these tight ends are truly spectacular players. The Outland Award would come down to Kenneth Scott of Georgia, Magnus Zimmerman of Notre Dame, and Angelo Nix of Minnesota. It was pretty close between Zimmerman and Nix, but ultimately, Notre Dame offensive guard Magnus Zimmerman would win the award. Zimmerman won the Outland Award last season, so he has now won it in back-to-back years, as he looks to be the first offensive guard to be drafted in the top 5 of the NFL draft in a very, very long time. As for the Remington Award for the best center in college football, it came down to Benvolio Berkeley of Syracuse, Carlisle Kaplan of Oregon, and Ahmed Kwanjo of Arizona. Ultimately, by a pretty decisive amount, Carlisle Kaplan of Oregon won the award. Kaplan is the anchor of one of the best offensive lines in the country. He's probably going to be a day 2 pick in this year's NFL draft, and I completely agree with him winning the award. Moving over to the defensive side of the ball, we have the Lombardi Award for the best defensive lineman. It came down to George Charbonnet II of Idaho, Mark Williams, the pass rusher out of Indiana, and then the ultimate winner by an absolute landslide ended up being Kansas State pass rusher Karamoko Sawadogo, who had 91 tackles, which led the team, 35 tackles for loss, 10.5 sacks. He was the best defensive lineman in the country this year and completely deserves this award, getting more than 100 votes compared to the second-place finisher in Mark Williams. Great season for Saradogo. He'll be a senior next year and probably a high pick in the NFL draft next year. The best linebacker came down to 3 people, 3 guys we've already talked about today. Asher Gonzalez, Devin Banks, and Aiden Milligan, the same 3 players up for the Bednarik and Nagurski Awards. And like both of those awards, Asher Gonzalez of San Diego State won in a landslide, which, again, is completely well-deserved. We already went over how good his numbers are. He's going to be a really high pick in the NFL draft. Very versatile defensive player. Again, the best defensive player in the country this year. By far the closest race to the entire video was for the Jim Thorpe Award, the best defensive back, and first and second place were only separated by 2 votes. The nominees, Michigan cornerback Castello Benedetto, Ohio State corner Jameer Jefferson, a projected top 3 pick in this year's upcoming draft, and Ball State safety Afanase Gothero. It ultimately was down to the 2 corners, Benedetto and Jefferson, of big-time rivals in Michigan and Ohio State. But ultimately, despite having Jefferson and Gothero finish as first-team All-Americans and not finishing in the top 10 for the Thorpe Award according to the game, Castello Benedetto was the winner with 66 votes, barely edging out Jameer Jefferson Jr., who had 64, including my vote. But as I really think about it, I honestly thought it should have gone to Gothero of Ball State. What he did at the safety position was so incredible. All 3 players were phenomenal, though, without a doubt. We did not vote on the Special Teams Award, so we'll just give those to who the game ended up choosing. The Lou Groza Award for the best kicker was Derek Wilson of Ohio State, so the Buckeyes get an award winner after all. The Ray Guy would go to Jeffrey Walker of Houston. Ironic, because Houston doesn't have to punt a whole lot. And then Jack Goyer of Tulsa won the Best Return Man of the Year award. So now that we've gone through all the awards, let's shift our attention to the college football playoff. We had the first ever 12-team playoff. The top 6 teams will be auto bids. These are the 6 main conference champions, and then 7 to 12 will be at-large bids. All right, let's get this officially started. The number 1 seed in this year's college football playoff will be no surprise the Clemson Tigers of the ACC. This was a pretty easy choice. Clemson's been the best team in the country this year. Of the 145 ballots sent in, Clemson received 140 first-place votes, and for every ballot they did not get first in, they ended up getting second. So everybody seems to think that Clemson's the best team in the country, and yeah, you can't really disagree with that. They're the only team to have gone undefeated. They had the Heisman Trophy winner at quarterback with Cade Hutchinson. They just steamrolled past Duke in the ACC Championship 42-10, giving them an auto bid and, well, deservedly earning a number 1 overall seed here for the playoff. Clemson was in a really talented ACC and pretty much completely dominated everybody with only 2 games decided by 1 score. They have blowouts against teams like Florida State, Syracuse, and obviously Duke to round things out. Cade Hutchinson is great, but it's not just him. Kobe Henderson, Latrell McAllister, Jordan Jones, and Xavier Mayo are a bunch of really talented skill position players. And then the defense is young, but also very talented. And I think Clemson, going into the college football playoff, will be the overall favorite to win it all. The number 2 seed in the playoff will be the Ohio State University. No major surprise here as the Buckeyes end up grabbing the number 2 spot. Ohio State grabbed 3 first-place votes and 117 second-place votes. And again, I think this was a pretty obvious choice. Ohio State has been the second-best team in the country this year, winning the Big Ten, which has proven to be the best conference in college football this year. They just beat Oregon in the Big Ten championship. Oregon is a great team. Despite a midseason hiccup to Wisconsin, the Buckeyes have been near perfect other than that. They've got playmakers on offense, they have the most talented defense in college football, and they are very deserving of this spot. To win a loaded Big Ten certainly is not easy, and Ohio State, whenever they played really good teams, they've dominated. They blew out Missouri, they blew out Michigan, they blew out Penn State, they blew out Indiana, and they handled Oregon in the conference championship. Senior quarterback Marco Brunley has had a fantastic season. Mookie Davis, Ramir Conwell, Chaz Suggs, and Auden Green are a great group of playmakers, but it's the defense who leads this team. We've already talked about how good Jameer Jefferson is at corner, but they've got other guys. We saw how good Steve Stifler was in the Big Ten Championship, pretty much taking over that game, leading Ohio State to the victory. The number 3 seed in the college football playoff will be the TCU Horned Frogs of the Big 12. TCU ended up going 12-1 this season en route to winning their conference. What a great story this team is. I mean, last year they went 7-5. They weren't bad by any stretch, but nobody really expected them to be a playoff team. But they've relied on breakout stars on both sides of the ball, such as running back Harry Stewart and quarterback Sterling Yorkshire, who was not even supposed to be the starter going into the year. But TCU liked what they saw from him in spring ball, and it completely paid off. The resume for the Horned Frogs really speaks for itself, with big wins against Missouri, Houston, an awesome comeback against Texas, a nice win against Alabama, blowing out Baylor, and then blowing out Missouri in the conference championship. It is gutsy to have a young quarterback play well like Cade Brown and then choose not to start him the next year, instead changing to Sterling Yorkshire, but that decision has completely paid off for TCU. Harry Stewart, Mario Hummeler, and Vlade Duvac lead a great offensive unit, but their defense is really the strength of this team. They've got a great linebacking core, a great group of pass rushers, and plenty of talent in the secondary. They have a very senior-driven defense with a lot of experience and veterans who hopefully can lead them to a nice run. The 4th seed and the final team getting a first-round bye in the college football playoff this season will be the Middle Tennessee State Blue Raiders of the American Athletic Conference. The highest-ranked Group 5 team is automatically getting a auto bid, and this year that was Middle Tennessee State, who went 12-1, winning the American Conference, earning a first-round bye, and coming back to the college football playoff for a second straight season. Last year, Middle Tennessee State was the number 2 seed. They ended up losing in the first round to Georgia, and the Bulldogs ultimately won the championship. Middle Tennessee State's out for blood. They lost last year. They've got a lot of their key guys back from a season ago, and a lot of guys who were not healthy last year who are fully healthy, most notably wide receiver Nehemiah Dalton. It was a big adjustment for Middle Tennessee State to move from the Conference USA to the American Athletic, but the transition was seamless. Despite a loss to Navy halfway through the year, the Blue Raiders were pretty much perfect after that. Junior quarterback Drain Ignatius, a first-year starter, really improved throughout the year. Evan Barrington, Britt, Nehemiah Dalton, and Matt Burnett led the offense. Their defense was great, too, with guys like Ezekiel Uwazurike and Justin Kaplan leading the way. All right, let's see the number 5 seed. Who will be hosting a first-round playoff game? It's going to be the SEC champion, Oklahoma Sooners. So Norman will be the first stop for a college football playoff game as they will face off against the number 12 seed. Oklahoma's got some unfinished business. Last year, they lost the SEC championship, and had they won that game, not only would they have gotten into the college football playoff, but I think they would have won it all. So Oklahoma came into this season with a vengeance, and although this season was not perfect, Oklahoma went 9-3 with some questionable losses. When they had to win, they won, and they won big in the SEC championship against Kentucky, completely running over the Wildcats defense. Oklahoma, who is not a run-first offense, might I add, ran for 540 yards in the SEC championship en route to a big victory over Kentucky. It's not an easy thing to win the SEC, and Oklahoma was able to do that when it was all said and done. Again, the Sooners had some hiccups early with close losses early in the season against Florida and Georgia, two very good teams. But after that, Oklahoma was nearly perfect. They lost to A&M in Week 12, but other than that, things were great, and they're playing their best ball these last few weeks, particularly on offense. Romeo Colochi, another first-year starter, has really improved throughout the year. Darion Seals is a great running back. And then in the receiving core, Bryce Berry, Justin Bruneau, Matt Montgomery, and Noah Hampton lead the way. The defense is really talented, too, with guys like Gilbert Smith, Rayshawn Russell, and Udo Afolabi leading the front unit. Their secondary is a little bit suspect, but the rest of their unit is really good. So that means there's only one possible team who could get the 6th seed, and that is the Cal Golden Bears, the winner of the Pac-12 Conference. So they will be hosting a playoff game in Berkeley against the number 11th seed. Pretty easy decision here. I think Cal was the worst team of the conference champions, and it seemed like you guys agree. So we now have our top 6. I completely agree with this order of the 6 teams. As you can see, my vote was the exact order that things ended up in. Looking at this Cal team, they've got quite the story. They went 8-4 in the regular season. They were heavy underdogs in the Pac-12 championship game against Washington, and for a while, they were losing. They were down 24-9 going into the fourth quarter, but Cal outscored Washington 29-0 in the fourth quarter en route to winning the game and punching their ticket to the college football playoff. I think Cal is going to be the worst team in this playoff. They're going to be worse than all the other at-large bids, but they're going to be a really fun Cinderella story. If they can string together some wins, if they can beat the 11th seed in the first round, maybe they'll have a shot against TCU in the second round. It'll be really interesting to see how they do. This is another team playing their best football these last few weeks. Sophomore quarterback Rufus Mobley is pretty inconsistent as a passer, but he's dynamic as a runner. Marquette Collins, Harrison Myers, and Julian A. Butius lead a talented group of skill position players, and then the defense is really talented. Kobe Bryant dominated down the stretch in the Pac-12 championship game. Troy Danham is one of the best corners in the country. Hyman Crawley is a great linebacker as well. So now this is where things get really interesting. We already knew those top 6 teams that we just went over, we already knew they were going to make the playoff. It was just about seeding for them. Now it's time to see the other 6 teams who get in. These are the at-large teams who did not win their conferences, but they were voted on by you guys as the 6 best non-conference champions in the country, and they will have an opportunity to win the national title. Let's start with the 7th seed. This is, according to you guys, the best non-conference champion in college football, and that team is the Florida Gators. So somebody is headed to Gainesville to take on Florida in the first round of the playoffs. I completely agree with Florida being number 7. I think they are the best non-conference champion in the country. They have been dominant really throughout the entire second half of the season. They have a very balanced offense and a really good defense as well. The game in Week 14 against Florida State really cemented Florida as a playoff team with the late pick six in the fourth quarter by All-American safety Johnny Lee Farr to win Florida the game and punch their ticket. I think Florida would have still gotten in had they lost, but they would have been a lot lower as a seed, probably 10th or 11th. So as we look at Florida, they started the year on fire. They won 4 in a row. They looked really, really impressive. But then they lost back-to-back games against Kentucky and Alabama. But ever since then, they've been pretty much perfect with wins against teams like Florida State and Georgia. Ernie Capellar is a great young quarterback. Elijah Bryant is one of the most talented running backs in the country. Deontay Perkins and Louis Diamatildis are a great receiving duo. And although their defense is a little inconsistent, they have a lot of talent from the front lines to the secondary. Let's now find out the 8th seed, the final team who will get to host a first-round college football playoff game, and that team will be the Oregon Ducks, the runners-up of the Big Ten Conference. So the number 9 seed will be traveling to Eugene, Oregon to face off against the Ducks. Oregon won the Big Ten West in their first season as a member of the conference, but ultimately they lost in the Big Ten Championship to Ohio State. However, Oregon is still absolutely deserving of an at-large bid, and I don't think their conference championship loss should really hurt them that much. Ultimately, for me, they were my number 8 team as well. Oregon had a great season. They were better compared to last year, despite being in a way worse conference than last season. They lost early to USC. They lost in overtime to Notre Dame. But other than that, they were pretty much perfect in the regular season with a big statement win late in the year against Nebraska and a competitive loss to Ohio State in the conference championship. Barrett Cherokee and Noel Hilaire are a dynamic duo in the backfield. The offensive line might be the best in the country, and their defense has taken a drastic step up from a year ago and is a very respectable unit who played well in the conference championship against Ohio State. Let's now find out the number 9 seed, who will be facing off against Oregon in the first round of the college football playoff. It'll be another team from the Big Ten, a team who Oregon played and beat this year, the Michigan Wolverines. So Michigan is back in the playoff for a second straight season. They made it last year. They lost on a game-winning touchdown by South Alabama, and they are back for blood. This year wasn't necessarily as pretty for Michigan, but they still had a great season going 10-2, led by senior quarterback Bartholomew Blount. So the thing for Michigan is they haven't lost to anybody bad, but if you look at their 2 losses, they got killed by Oregon, who they're going to have to beat, and then they got killed by Ohio State, both of which were at home, and they don't have many statement wins on their resume, but they were really good outside of those 2 games, and I do think they deserve this number 9 seed. Bartholomew Blount is a dynamic playmaker at quarterback. Casey Aceron and Emmett Denzel are a good duo in the backfield. TK Thomas is probably going to be a first-round pick, and the defense is really solid as well, led by the Jim Thorpe Award winner Costello Benedetto at corner. So will Michigan be able to get revenge on Oregon, or will the Ducks be able to beat them twice this year? The number 10 seed will be the Nebraska Cornhuskers. They will travel out to Florida to face off against the Gators in the first round, and the winner will play against Ohio State in Columbus. Of all the college football playoff teams, I think Nebraska is probably the most surprising. They completely deserved this, but I would have never guessed this at the beginning of the year. Nebraska ended up going 10-2. They play an old-school, tough style of football, but they can also run up the scoreboard, scoring at least 35 points in every single game this year with a big win late in the year against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Jeffrey McCoy had a great season as the leader of the offense. DeAnthony Ford and Melly Boskets lead a really good group of skill position players, and their defense is very solid as well, led by linebacker Aiden Milligan, who was up for many big-time awards this season, but it's not just him. Mike Jack, James Johnston, and Tim Liang are a great group of guys as well. So the Big Ten now has 4 teams to have gotten into the college football playoff. 4 is a crowd, but 5? Yeah, I think we can make room for a 5th. The number 11 seed going up against Cal will be the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Of the 5 at-large bids we have announced so far, 4 of these teams come from the Big Ten. This is actually the first one I disagree with. I completely agreed with the ordering of the top 10 teams. However, I personally did not vote Notre Dame to get into the college football playoff. I had them as my number 14 team, so a couple spots out. The Fighting Irish went 9-3 this year, barely losing the Big Ten West to Oregon, who they beat earlier in the year, and Nebraska. The Irish started the year on fire, but they kind of came back down to earth throughout the season. Their offense is very one-dimensional, but the one thing they do well, they do really well, and that's run the football with MJ Hill, who was up for many big-time awards, including the Heisman Trophy. Their defense is a really talented unit as well. I just felt this team was a little bit inconsistent compared to the other playoff teams, but I don't have a major problem with them getting in. So there's now one more spot to go. Who's it going to be? We had a very close vote for the 12th seed between the defending champion Georgia Bulldogs and the Houston Cougars. All right, is it going to be Georgia or Houston? The number 12 team going to Oklahoma. It's going to be the Houston Cougars. Kane Sanders leads the Cougars to an unlikely playoff spot. How about that? Houston went 10-2 in this season. I did not know if it was going to be enough to get an at-large bid, but ultimately they were able to get the final spot in this year's college football playoff, and I completely agree that they are definitely deserving of this honor. Houston had a great season with big wins against teams like Duke, Oklahoma State. They did lose to Iowa State, who stinks. They also lost to TCU, but they had a nice win against Baylor late as well. Kane Sanders has been arguably the best quarterback in the country this year. Kramer Gilderford has been the best receiver in the country. Houston's defense is not the greatest, though. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to handle Oklahoma's high-octane offense, but Houston's certainly going to be able to score and score a lot. I think the Cougars really could make a run as the number 12 seed. They have arguably the best quarterback in the tournament. They have arguably the best offensive skill position player in the tournament. So there you go. Those are our 12 teams to get into the college football playoff. This is what our bracket looks like. These are the 12 teams fighting for a national championship. As for the teams who did not make the cut, this is the order they ended up finishing. Georgia barely missed out, so the defending champs will not make it back. Central Michigan finished in 14th. That was a big surprise to me. I did not think they should have been that high, especially with a team like Florida State all the way at 18th. I thought the Seminoles got really disrespected. Although I personally did not vote for Florida State to get in, they were my first team out, even higher than Notre Dame. The only major gripe I would say I have is Notre Dame getting in to begin with over Georgia. I gave Georgia my 11th place vote. I think they're a better team than Notre Dame, although the Fighting Irish are obviously a really solid squad as well. They'll certainly be favored to beat Cal in the first round. So here is a full look at all of the votes across the board. If you're not entirely sure how the point total works, pretty much the number 1 or the number 7 seed, I multiplied the number of votes the team got by 6. For the 2nd and 8th seed, I multiplied that by 5, etc., added it all up. So that's how the point system pretty much worked out. So that's going to wrap up the episode here. We have now revealed the 12 teams going into the college football playoff. Next episode will not be the playoff, unfortunately. I apologize. Next episode, we're going to be going through all of the other bowl games, and then we will hop into the playoff. I'm not entirely sure how many episodes I'm going to divide the playoff into because it's 11 games. That's too much for one episode, so I'm probably going to end up dividing it into 2. I'm thinking maybe we do the first and second rounds in one episode, and then the final 4 in the national championship in another. Maybe we split it into 3 episodes. I'm not really sure. I haven't really figured it out yet. Let me know what type of format you guys would like to see down below in the comments. So yeah, that's going to wrap it up. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Peace out.